When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, brought to you by me, Mark Ledlow, the host. The sponsor would be Ledlow Security Group, I guess, would put it that way. We have an amazing guest. He's been in the industry for quite a long time, and we do a lot of business together. He's in New York, actually, with Integris, the president and CEO. Forhad, how do you pronounce the last name?
Razzaque.
There you go. That way I didn't chop it up. And
all good.
All good. And so here we are. We got a lot going on in the world right now. We have a lot of risk and threats going on. Got things popping up where we're like, well, if we can magically prevent this from happening, we wouldn't have any problems. And for Forhad's team, they do a lot of investigations, backgrounds. You guys are in the risk assessment, threat assessment world, and mainly investigation. So what is your life like right now from where it was 20 years ago? Because you used to be in the field too, and used to be an agent and running around. You and Patrick Kane, shout out to Pat Kane with Atlas. You've been around the block. You're not a rookie anymore. You're like a OG, I think, is what they say.
I'm going to take a role somewhere in between, just to not show my age. But yeah, no, I've been very, very, very fortunate to be in this industry for as long as I have. So 25 years ago, you mentioned Pat Kane. Pat and I worked. My entry into the security world was a fantastic company called Guardsmark, which is no longer around. It was acquired by Allied Universal a few years ago. But I got, I always say I got a chance to play for the Yankees right out of college. And, we mainly provided uniformed security guard services. It was the largest U.S.-owned company at the time. I got to work with some fantastic people from the federal government, the FBI, and the Secret Service, as well as the military, like Pat and many others, and then folks like myself that were either in business and learned the security world together, or just started as security officers and worked their way up. So that's really when you say what was I doing, I didn't know what I was doing, because that business is a tough business, and it's still a tough business because you got clients that have needs, you have officers that have needs, and you have your own needs, which usually go last in that world.
Right. Yeah, they always seem to change. So what were you doing? Were you in college? Was that part of your trajectory? Tell the industry. We don't want to date you as an OG, but you kind of know what you're doing.
Well, actually, my background is probably like many. Everyone has their own story, but I actually immigrated from Bangladesh to the U.S. With my mom and dad and my sister. I grew up in Queens, New York, which is the most diverse city in the world, and it's still where I call home. And so I grew up in the city. I still am a city kid, and basically. I was on a trajectory initially to go into medicine.
Wow.
Right. And I went to a great high school here in New York, Brooklyn Tech, which still is very near and dear to my heart. Actually, it's my 30th, reunion coming up in a couple of weeks. And so that's a long time ago, but it really set the foundation for who I am still today. Right. Unfortunately, in the senior year, and I remember you talking about your dad when you were on our podcast. Unfortunately, in my senior year in high school, my dad passed away right before the summer of senior year, and so being from a fairly traditional Southeast Asian household, being the oldest male, I had an older sister who was unbelievable and fantastic and the true leader of our family. But just being the male eldest sort of is a default role, right? And so, and then there was my mom, who was a stay-at-home mom who had never really been worked outside of the home, but she was the real chairman and CEO of our family, right? And so my dad, he was in the restaurant business, and he had a restaurant in Brooklyn here, not too far from where I grew up. And it was in like the East New York area, which to this day is probably an area that still needs a lot of improvement. At that time, it was pretty dangerous, a lot going on. And my brother and I, he's unbelievable. I mean, he was 11 years old at the time, and both of us and my sister and everybody else, we all kind of piecemealed it together, and we ran this deli that my father owned. And that was really our first experience, our work experience, right? And it was probably the best experience because it taught us about customers, customer service, how to deal with complaints, everything, right? Quality control and all that sort of stuff. But it also gave me an introduction into security, man, because it was in a rough area, right? So we learned about a lot of things very, very quickly, right? And so what happens is, fast forward, it's time for me to pick a college, right? And again, I still wanted to do medicine. So I ended up going to NYU here in New York, pre-med curriculum. And is great school. And so I was on the pre-med track, but I decided to major in economics, right? So pre-med is not an actual major. It's a curriculum that you have to take the next step. So anyway, like many others that follow that path, I realized really quickly that you don't become a doctor by accident. And I had lost some focus on school after my dad died. You know, we had a rough going because we were running the shop. We were going to school. We were taking care of and I say we because we were all working together, right? And so my grades weren't that great, but what ends up happening is that somewhere between, I guess, chemistry, physics, and organic chemistry, I realized pretty quickly that I just wasn't cut for medicine, right?
The reality hit you in the face.
And so because I was already majoring in economics, I said, this is what I'll follow. So thinking about it at the time, basically at that time, you were just trying to finish college to get a job, right?
Make some money.
So that's what I did. I was focused on, forget the grades. I just wanted to pass and get out of college, right? So come senior year, NYU has a great career services department. And I landed a job early spring of my senior year. But I kept interviewing. And so I accepted a job in business, right? It was a fantastic offer. At that time, again, the economy was booming. Kids out of schools like NYU were being picked up right away. Great offers, great signing packages, all those kind of things. And so what happens is I keep interviewing, and one day I meet the folks from Guardsmark, and it was two people, a gentleman by the name of Jim Tomlinson, who was just recently retired from the FBI. He was the special agent in charge of their New York office. He was hired by this company essentially to help grow it in the New York region, right? And Hillary Guindon, who was the HR person. Anyway, long story short, I hit it off with them right away. I thought that they were going to make me a job offer. Fast forward to like a week before I'm set to start the other job, right? I called Jim and I say, hey, Jim, I got to start next week, man. What are we doing here? And he says, let me call you back. And he calls me back and he says, I got good news and I got bad news for you, right? The good news is I have an offer for you. The bad news is that Guardsmark recruited from the best schools in the country, UPenn, Harvard, I mean, all the great schools around the country. And the kids that got recruited that way got a significantly better offer than the kids that did not. This was the first year they were recruiting from NYU, and Jim thought it was important to get homegrown talent, right? And so he says, I was trying to get you one of the Ivy League offers, but I was unsuccessful, right?
What does that mean?
He says, well, I'll tell you what it means. It basically amounted to, he says, well, I said, what's your offer? And he says, I can offer you $35,000 a year, right? And so I said, because my other offer was significantly more than that. There was a sign-on bonus and there was a guaranteed end of the year bonus.
Wow.
Basically, which would amount to double the 35,000, right? And so I said, all right, well, let me think about it. I go back to my mom and my brother and my sister, and I said, this is a horrible offer. And I never imagined essentially being a lead security officer. It was an account management role, but that's what you're doing. Yeah. You're just essentially leading a group of security officers. And my mom, in not so many words, says, we really don't have anything. So anything you add is going to be an addition, right? So they all basically said, do what you think will make you happy. And I took the leap, and that's what got me into this business, right? And fast forward, I mean, Jim, just like he said he would, he took care of me if I performed. I had a good knack for building relationships, bringing in new customers, and we grew the business a lot. We had a great team, and frankly, I learned so much at Guardsmark that I still apply today. So that's the first part of my career. So, yeah. So
you're a ninja, not necessarily a military CAI ninja. I'll get a little shout out for the. We got the
all right.
That's what
awesome.
happens when you partner with quality, classy people in New York. They give you merch for the holidays.
Well, listen, I learned that from Guardsmark. That's one of the things they used to always do. They make everybody walking advertisements.
Yeah, and that's your superpower. You didn't have to be a Tier 1 Delta, Navy SEAL, 6-team, CI operator. You're just good at relationships, like you said, and he saw something in you, and he let you cut you loose. And next thing you know, you're bringing in business. And what's the number one skill set you need in security? Customer service. Dealing with people.
Customer service.
It just shows the audience you don't have to be a Navy SEAL. You don't have to be a law enforcement military person to have success. And you're proof of that through your life. And here you are, the president and CEO of Integris, and running like crazy with your team over there. And who would have guessed?
It's true. I mean, we did that for about 6 years, and like my story is not complete without my partner, Tony Picciano. Now, we have other partners, but he and I go back, in fact, to our days at Guardsmark. He was in your neck of the woods, actually. He went to the Wharton School of Business. Wow. He was one of the Wharton kids. So is Rob Chang, by the way. They both made more money than I did. But I'm not holding that against them. But he was in L.A., actually, and he was out there for a good number of years and then came to Stanford we met when he came to Stanford at one of the company functions. And anyway, fast forward, we started our first business in 2006, a consulting company based off of our experience in the guard business. So essentially helping organizations select, procure, and manage their outsourced security guard forces. And so, long story short, it was a great business, great idea. But what we learned now, I think you're going to ask me about this later, but you can have as great of a product or service as you want. But if people don't buy, it can only go so far. And we learned that it was a great business, great idea. We did have plenty of customers, but it was very difficult to scale. So we ended up selling that business. And I'm using the term selling loosely to a company out in Long Island. And that was our entry into the investigative world. This is around 2008. So Tony and I, we worked there, we became partners, and eventually left in 2016, acquired a company that was previously called TK Consulting and Investigations, renamed, rebranded it, and 10 years later, here we are.
Wow. Acquisitions, being bought out, buying other people out for their books of business. Would you say that we're going to probably have a cycle in the industry of acquisitions because you have AI now, that's driving a lot here, that's driving a lot of GSOCs and stuff, new technology, and it's going to change the industry as a whole. I think we're going to see massive changes.
Well, I think there's different components to the business, right? So you take the traditional security guards,
right,
and I think there's going to continue to be acquisitions. Then you take executive protection firms, right? And I think those are also a little bit easier to get your arms around and perhaps consolidate and acquire. Sure. But then once you start getting into the world of consulting, investigations and such, it gets a little bit more complicated because the relationships are the business. And so it's a little bit, the value is typically higher to the owners, the principals, than it is to the people that want to buy the company. So, and then, the technology side, yes, I see merging of technologies and technology companies and, acquisitions in that world. So, but the thing with technology also is that it gets old quick.
It outdated itself in a matter of 6 months.
Yeah. Sometimes, it's like buying a car. By the time you leave, there's already something new, right? What do you think about that? Do you also think that there's going to be a lot of that? Or
I had a conversation, which I have to keep it private, being a public forum like this, but I did hear his organization uses AI to do their recruiting. I'm not going to say who. And he said they're shifting all their whole call center, data center overseas. They sent it all overseas for cost. And he said that they're using AI to drive their entire GSOC. And so they're trying to eliminate all headcount, of course. And he said they've been doing that for the last 6 months to a year. And a lot of the top level leadership are just getting, there's just, everybody's unhappy, well, they're be treated, but technology is driving the force for bottom line profitability. And I thought to myself, well, I'm a boutique company, and so this plays well in my favor because my clients don't want to deal with AI. They don't want to deal overseas to a truck line of somebody with an accent that can barely understand them. That's why people are calling the boutique guys and gals owners that have companies that they want somebody to answer the phone and they want to feel important. If you can't do that, you're going to lose a lot of business.
I think I agree with you. I'm not sure if we're at the stage yet where customers, especially as it relates to security, I think there's still a lot of distrust. I think it's a great tool. I think it's an accelerator for trying to do things more efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that.
I just don't think it's a replacement.
No, I would agree.
And I'm not sure that it will ever be a replacement.
Good call. Yeah, so time will tell. Everything's on the last, what, 4 or 5, year and a half is everything's been AI data centers, AI data farms going all across the U.S. and here. All these companies are canceling their orders. So it's just weird right now in the time that we're living in. And when I said in that chat with that banker after leaving D.C. after OSAC week, this guy was just going to town on his computer on Wi-Fi or whatever he's doing. And I looked at him and said, "You must be a banker or something." He goes, "Yeah, I run a hedge fund." I was curious and said, "Hey, well, what's the biggest threat to banks right now? What are you guys all concerned about? Crypto and AI. We don't know how to gauge it. We don't know how to measure the risk. We don't want to touch it. It's yet to be proven."
Right.
Like, oh, fair enough. That came from a banker. But yeah, it's we're in very we're different times in our lives right now with the economy. The uncertainty is driving the decision makers batty because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to forecast these changes. They just never seen this stuff before. So when you have younger people coming in these roles and they go, "What do I do with this? I don't even know how to get a budget together. Maybe I'll use AI and do a budget." or maybe talk to my CFO. "Hey, what do you recommend?" But it's bizarre times. But I know the EP industry, I hear, is slow out there in the marketplace right now because of all the world uncertainty. You got the stuff going on in the Middle East right now, and just uncertainty there, and the uncertainty in the business world. Everybody's, I think, holding their breath, sitting on their wallets. So, being the president of your firm, what keeps you going? What are your pain points for your clients, and what do you do day in, day out as the president of Integris?
I guess the pain points for our clients are, ultimately, I think all clients want the same thing. They want us, they want to be able to contact someone, and essentially you to provide them with solutions, right? So whether it's we have an investigation we need to run, we have, background checks that we need to conduct, we have an executive protection detail that we need help with, or we need, an assessment to be done, right? I think all of our clients, it's natural for them to go to do as others do. I think that's a common thing, right? When, the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO happened, right? Now everybody is concerned about executive protection and all the pieces around their executives and, do we have so on and so forth. That's a natural thing. Of course, they're going to ask questions like that, right? Then you get the situation at 345 Park, and I'm just talking about local things because it's near and dear here. You get that shooting, and so now questions are being asked about building security and perimeter and all that sort of stuff. And do we need safe rooms? Do we need armed agents? Do we need better procedures, better, physical security, all those kind of things? So I think that some of these incidents force people to think about things that they may not otherwise always think about in the right way. But, one of the things we try to push to our clients is, and you'll understand this better than everyone, is strategy before tactics, right? Assess your own risk. Your risk is not someone else's risk, and vice versa.
What if that client doesn't see the value doing a risk assessment, threat assessment? They just don't want to spend the money. Do you walk away? What do you do that? Because we come across that all the time.
Well, no, so look, I think for us, one of the things that I certainly, when I'm engaged with the client, say is, okay, so tell us what you think you need and why you think you need it, right? And as we sort of dissect it, they either come to learn that, okay, yeah, maybe an assessment. There's varying degrees of assessments too, right? So maybe you don't have to go, to the nth degree, but you could do at least the basic one, right? And as we start asking questions, as we start, probing a little bit further, either they understand it and are cooperative, or they're not. If they're not, unless we see a risk of advising them otherwise, obviously we try to accommodate as best as we can. But we find that most reasonable clients, right, are willing to at least entertain it. And for those that really don't want to go down that road, we oftentimes will say, maybe we are not the right partner for you because, again, it would be imprudent of us to not really learn your risks before advising on.
Be able to walk away from that client and say, hey, maybe we're just not a good fit for you. Maybe go down the street, talk to XYZ company. Maybe they're a better fit. It's just being able to walk away and have that, not power, but trying to be a professional risk advisor. If the client doesn't want to listen and hear you out, maybe it's just not a good fit, not a good match. Because if you're starting now having hurdles with them to give your information, it's going to be that way for the whole relationship.
That's a great point, Mark. I think bad relationships at the start only get worse, right?
Absolutely.
And somewhere in the middle, or good relationships seem to get better over time.
Now, out of all your business, just for the executive protection folks that listen to the podcast, what would you say out of 100% pie chart, what would you say is the breakup of your business? Would you say 50-50, 50% investigations background, the 10% EP work, and maybe 20% site security? What would that look like?
No, I think our business is probably 60 to 70% in the world of background investigations. Now, let me clarify what that means. That's, vetting employees. That's due diligence work for like mergers and acquisitions. That's conducting checks on people of interest, whether that's litigation support, whether that's threat assessment, whether that's, whatever that world is. And then the remainder of the business is kind of everything else, right? But the beauty of, having a foundation of this, because almost every single engagement that we have touches back on our foundation somehow, right? So if we're going to do an executive protection detail, there's research around that. There's threat assessments around that. There's, local, what's going on, where we're going around that, right? So, I mean, I think that's probably the best description.
That's a big piece of the pie, in the security investigation industry. That's a pretty balanced business model.
Well, we found that, this is where smart guys and gals on our team, like Tony, like Rob, like Joe, like Mike, scalability is a really important thing.
Absolutely.
Right? And so there's certain things that are just difficult to scale. I don't care how big you are. I don't care how much resources you have. You're almost always too busy or too slow.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Hello, everyone. This is Mark, the host of the Fearless Mindset podcast, and we just wrapped up our first episode with Forhad. Came up to the 30-minute mark, and I know you guys are all traveling and you're doing your workouts and doing shopping and, doing push-ups or whatever for your 30 minutes. So we're running into our next 30-minute episode with Forhad with Integris out of New York. And so we've been having a great conversation on his life, his journey, his track of going to becoming a doctor. Then he was taking organic chemistry and biochemistry and goes, this is not my cup of tea. I don't like this at all. I'm going to go do something else. Let me go major in economics. So you have to listen to that first episode to get that storyline from Forhad. Great storyline. I never saw that coming, and that's the beauty of the podcast. So now we're diving into Forhad being a CEO, President of Integris, and what that looks like. We're talking about the business side of things, and the tail end of the first episode, we were talking about the pie chart, what the business itself looks like from investigation to EP. So we're going to do a little deeper dive into what it's like to be the CEO and president and the demands of being in an executive role. And how do you get to sleep at night? That's a good question. How do you sleep at night, Rod?
Well, I'll tell you one thing is that this has not been a short journey. And again, you're going to hear me talk about Tony
Yeah.
repeatedly, Tony Picciano, my original partner. And, we've been through a lot over the last 20 years. And as a business owner, everything is extreme,
Absolutely.
right? Like the good feels like nothing else, right? And the bad feels as
Sucks
the worst.
life
There's
out of you.
nothing worse than that. Yeah. So we've been through quite a bit of both. And what we realized over time, and what I guess this is life and experience teaches you, is that things get better, things get worse, right?
So true.
And some of those things are within your control. Some of them
Right.
are outside of your control. So we've always focused on systems, process, and we talk about, I know this is cliche, but we talk about controlling what we can control, right? And I think that's been probably one of the biggest points that has led to long-term success for us, because again, I can't say that we've always been successful.
Yeah, you just never know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And being an entrepreneur and business owner, you just don't know. And you got to lead the different
Right.
personalities and get them to get along. And sometimes that doesn't even work.
Yep.